Welcome to Belly Up to the Blackboard, a podcast focused on the reality of teaching and other musings from and about professionals, hosted by Chris Munn and Justin Russell. Today's episode is our inaugural episode called Welcome to Our World, an introduction to who we are and what we are about. So guys, tell me what motivates you to do this podcast, why you think you have anything to say other than the millions of other podcasts out there, how you got into teaching, where you're at in your career, and why the hell anyone should listen to you.
It's a great question. I don't know.
Can you repeat what we're doing today?
Off to a good start, guys.
No, I think, you know what? There are a ton of podcasts out there, and we just thought it'd be fun to, get together once a week and talk about the things that we see, through what we've seen throughout teaching and what we see, and just different stories of teaching, around the country, and, have people on maybe to talk about, their teaching experience so far and like maybe goals. I don't know. We'll just see what happens.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is, a lot of podcasts talk about interventions and how to, change what you're doing. And really, this podcast is more about just like those stories that nobody tells you before you start teaching, right? Like the things we wish we would have known at 19, 20, 21 before we went into teaching. And then just some of those anecdotal things that, occur that no one really tells you about. So
that's why I think I appreciate this, is that you guys are not about thinking that you have the answers, you're going to solve everything for everybody, that your stories are not necessarily unique to teaching, but the understanding that everyone brings a different perspective to education. And especially in this time, talk about why now? I feel like you guys have been in this long enough. They're both special ed teachers, by the way. Which there's a lot to say about that. But you guys have been in this long enough. What compels you, honestly, to think that, you know what, there's a voice for this. There's a voice for what we have to say, and what we have to say is valid.
Well, I think that, in this last year and a half, and, we can talk about COVID till, for quite a while, but there's experiences we've had in the last year and a half that we've never had, or other people have never experienced either. And that kind of got us thinking of, there's a lot of people out here who've experienced different things, not just in that last year and a half, but the last, since they've started teaching. And we thought, why not now? Let's see what everybody else has to say.
yeah, absolutely. There's this idea that education means the same thing to everyone. And I think we have to kind of dig deeper in this, really talking through a lot of things. And so the idea is to have guest teachers come on and really talk about their profession, about where they are. Not trying to solve problems and talk about larger issues, but really just talking about how we're surviving day to day. Teaching is one of those great professions, but it is also a profession where your day one, you're expected to teach like a 20-year veteran. And there's supposed to be no differentiation in that. And it's different than any other profession in the world, yet we have to have a skill set that's higher than any other profession in the world, and we get paid, a fifth of that? And so the idea is never work for free.
I think you guys are getting paid more than I am.
Well, maybe that's the case, but you get front row parking, right, Liz?
Some days.
Yeah, if the band kids don't beat us there, right?
Well, what I always say is when you're in your undergraduate stuff for education, everything you're taught is theory, the theory of education. But then if you go on and go to your master's class, and at least for me, and I don't know about you guys, but for my master's courses, it was all things that you can see in the classroom. You have hands-on experience with. It's not just theory. It's things that you can actually take back to the classroom. And just Justin was saying, is that a lot of people don't know what's going on, or you're supposed to know everything right away. Well, you know the theory of things, but you've never experienced it. Even in a practicum or, in your student teaching, you're there for just a glimpse or, a moment in time, as opposed to when you start really working that day one of your first year of teaching, you're not, a lot of people are not ready for things that they did not go through it in their undergraduate stuff.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I remember my day one of teaching. So, like, all of my lesson plans and everything up into student teaching had been done on a smartboard. So I had used all this technology because college is awesome, right? Like, they spend millions of dollars.
You guys are way younger than me.
Well, you had the overhead and, you know, chisel and scribe with hammer, right?
What was that? The blue ink that we all smell like getting high from it. Okay.
I'm pretty sure that, you know, octopuses pooped it out or something, but you know, like, that's the thing. Like, you go in with, 10, 12 lesson plans into your student teaching, and you find out the school you're teaching at still has, like, 1920s technology. I mean, that's the issue. And then you're left to have to justify your horrible lesson plans after that, right? Like, and because you had to adjust on the fly. And I think that's an undervalued skill is that, you know, you think about teachers, man, you think about people who can make decisions on the fly, and they're in the best interest for kids, but in the same token, it is the autonomy to do that, but yeah, in the same token, you know, heaven forbid it's an evaluation day, right? Like, you have to go from plan A to C to D and then F. And that's the things that, you know, we're kind of wanting to do on this podcast is, as we're talking through those beginning years and then where we are now, how those thought processes have changed, but then also how our goals have changed.
Yeah, and not only like in Iowa, because that obviously that's where we're at, but what does it look like around the country? I mean, there's, you know, we talk about maybe the schools that we're in and what our resources are, but you know, you never know what somebody else is dealing with. And when we hit the pandemic and had to teach from home, now you have teachers that never touched a smart board or like your video conferencing, and it is a huge change, and along with that change is, you know, a lot of stress.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Liz. I mean, you've taught for a couple more years than Chris and I have.
They're calling me old.
We said a couple.
In a very nice way.
We said a couple. I mean, Chris and I are 38. You're what, like 43, 44?
Sure.
You had a kid when you were 15.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're at, right?
This is why I signed up with this guys.
But you can attest to the idea that there's not a very valid way to train teachers, right? Like, you think about, let's talk about stock traders. Stock traders have to be signed on an internship. They get paid jack squat, but they're for a year, they are working for somebody and learning. They're basically doing that person's job for a year. And the evaluation isn't the fact of, like, by this objective criterion of indicators, but it's really about, are they producing results? And you could probably attest to that, how that's changed over the years, right?
Well, and I think about, you know, we throw teachers into the classroom from day one. And I was not, as an undergrad, I was not a teaching major. I went straight English and did my teaching after that. But we throw teachers into the classroom the first day, and we expect us all to know exactly, like, what the hell we're doing. And we're not working with machines. We're not working with, like, we're working with humans in front of us. And that realization of, holy shit, like, what am I doing? And I think about that because I think teacher prep programs, there are good ones out there, but I think we underserve teachers when we look at lawyers, when we look at especially the medical profession and how they go through these residencies and all of this. And it's like, we would never think to put them in an operating room until they've had mentoring galore. They've had simulations, and we don't do that for teachers. And we are, you know, by society's judgments, we're the most important profession, most undervalued, but we'll get to that in another episode. But I mean, think about it. We are working with humans and shaping them, and we are thrown in first day, and it's like, 4 years undergrad should have served you well, like, get going. And I think most of us, for me personally, 28 years in this, it took me 10 years to go, okay, I think I'm close to understanding this, but I'm nowhere near it. So, I don't know. I think I veered off. I'm too drunk.
No. And to piggyback on your idea, though, like, we're talking about the ability to adapt. So, like, I feel like, and I shouldn't say feel, because I want to be as like factual as possible. So I know beyond a shadow of doubt that I could find factual information and studies that thinking about, right, Liz is over there fact checking us, right? But think about this, like in any other industry, failure when doing research or failure when conducting new ways to do things is celebrated, right? Like we think about entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs don't do well because they've never had failure. They are the ones who successful entrepreneurs continuously celebrate that failure. But teaching, we critique, we degrade, we criticize failure, right? Like when we try something new, it is you're a horrible teacher because it didn't work and kids aren't progressing. It really is the only profession where it is a pure outcome-driven profession that you're told you're a good teacher or a bad teacher. And I even think about that now where a lot of districts are going to, do you have a relationship with 110, 200, 300 kids, right? Like knowing that your kids inside and out, and that is the measurement of success. And right now, there has to be an understanding, and I think that's for new teachers, is that this profession has changed. When you think about the theories of education, you think about the applications of what it means to educate somebody, that landscape has changed drastically from a kid who does well academically to, are they doing well academically, socially? Are they doing well relationship-wise? Are they doing well with this, that, and this? And that metric still hasn't caught up with us, I don't think.
No, well, I think people get lost in the fact that, at least outside of education, is that you go and you teach the kids and they're successful, and if they're not, what are we doing wrong? Whereas, but inside, I know I've heard it multiple times, is you're not just a teacher. You're a teacher, you're a psychologist, you're a counselor, you're all these things wrapped into one, because kids come in, into the building each day with, God knows what has happened, or what they're dealing with, and just trying to set a lesson, right? As Justin's on his phone here.
I'm that kid in class.
Oh my God! Attention deficit.
You're trying to teach a lesson to kids.
Is this a pee break right
These
now?
guys are SPED teachers. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you got to understand that one day your lesson might be crap, but it's because a kid is working till 3 a.m. to help his family out. And I mean, for me, I've gotten to the point, it's like, I can accept that.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be perfect every day. And there's outside variables.
So to interrupt you on that topic though, like, tell me though, Chris, like, wouldn't you say, yes, we would all agree, there's this idea of academic deficiencies, right? But wouldn't you say a lot of our kids that we work with, it is not because of developmental delays. It is because of outside factors. Like you were just talking about. Because from the age of 12, they've been staying up all night helping work, right? Bring in income.
Yeah, or watching brother or sister while parents are working.
Yes. And so the academic delays are there, but it's not because of cognitive delays.
No.
It's because of outside factors, right?
Yeah, so in a perfect world, if they were, stable household from kindergarten through when they, come to us, you might not see anything. But there are delays because in second grade, they had to sleep all day because they watched brother or sister who was 2 or 3 while, parent was working or whatever it may be, which, had that effect in school. And, as a special ed teacher, and I know you're the same way, is that when I graduated from college, I was a social studies major. I was a social sciences major, did not have special ed. Went through some interviews, and then I got a call from an assistant principal at the time of the school, we went to, and asked if I was interested in special ed, if I ever thought about it. That was one of those, like, almost life-altering, well, it was a life-altering decision, because, like, do I do this? Or do I teach, am I sub for a year to, and just wait till I get a social studies job? And it was a BD job at the time, and it basically changed changed where I went from. I loved SPED and just switched eventually to like a level 1 room. And but yeah, it's you never. And then I didn't have any training for special ed in college. You know, it was on the fly. I was taking classes as I was teaching in the room, and that's how some people start their profession too.
And I can kind of relate to that because I was an English undergrad.
What does that mean? Can you explain, like, Liz, what is an English is that like just like sitting out in the country writing poetry by the lake? Like, what does that mean? Like,
pretty much.
Undergrad.
So an English undergrad is basically like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing with the rest of my life, but I really like these authors and I really like to read this stuff. I never thought I wanted to be a teacher, but I think the teacher was ingrained with me. So I don't know. I always thought I wanted to go to law school. Another episode. But to your point, like, I don't know what the fuck your point was.
Do you remember the point?
We'll edit that out.
The point is really, like, I think it narrows down to, like, what Chris was saying is that we at times are so, as teachers, I believe, are so driven by outcomes, right? Like, the data. Like, a perfect example today, and this is another episode, but if 80% are succeeding, there's 20% who aren't. So we need to change systems that meet that 20%. And I think that's what you're driving home, right, Chris, is that we are talking about the systems that are in place for our career, but in the same token, it is this idea that we don't have room to fail, right? Like, there's no breathing room. It is every day these kids have to make progress or we're not good teachers. And would you agree, Liz and Chris, that is kind of a stressor, right? Like, we have to have visual results or there is some kind of downside to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that's our goal, is for kids to be successful. You know, for special ed, to close that gap and, you know, to hit that mark we're looking for them, their goal. But again, there's outside things that interfere with it. You know, you have a kid that's, like I said before, working until 3 a.m. and can't keep their eyes open in class. It's hard to move the needle with that kid when all they they need sleep. You know, even if you try to keep them awake or keep them awake, it's falling on deaf ears because they can't focus enough to even keep their eyes open.
So here's what I guess I want to think about too, is when we think about this podcast and what we are going to bring different from maybe other podcasts. We're not here to pontificate as far as like we know best. We're not going to tell you how to make teaching, you know, we've got all the answers. It comes back to that point that we said in our heading, like, you know, this is musings from and about professionals who are humans. And as much as we are tasked with remembering that the people in front of us are humans, like, society has to remember also that as professionals, we are humans and we cannot fix all the ills of society from education. We are people who signed up for, what'd you say, your undergrad?
Social sciences,
English.
I'm actually phys ed and health. So you have 3 people here who, you know, teaching was our calling. I firmly believe that, and I have confidence in the 2 people with me that, like, this is a vocation for us, but we're not on this linear path of we're going to change lives. And I think that's what's missed in education, is that, you know what, we are people who decided to take this calling that a lot of people criticize, a lot of people devalue, but they aren't the ones that are going to take up the arms either and come join us. And so I think this podcast is all about also, like, remembering the people behind the students who, you know what, we're humans. And my God, we have stuff going on as well. We want the best for our students. We got in this because I do believe if we identify it or not, like, I do believe we all felt a calling.
Do you remember the moment? Did you have that moment of, I'm going to become a teacher.
Yeah, I did, and this is kind of a downer.
Well, good thing we're drinking.
I think in any educator, there are stories. I don't think there's one story. I think there are stories, and hopefully we can all share those as far as
moments that led up to that decision.
And I
right?
feel like we're validated and motivated by people who were for and against us in our educational career. But honestly, like, this is the downer. So in 5th grade, I had this wonderful teacher. And we adored her. She was just great. She was awesome. She was 23. At that age, she was like 50 to us, whatever. Anyway, okay.
She was probably only like 30.
This is the downer, folks. She was 23. But like 3 weeks before we were going into 6th grade, like...
What was her name? Do you remember?
Yeah, Kitty Menzel.
Remember to this day,
I'll never
right?
forget this.
Yes.
And this is the sad part. So she took her own life like 3 weeks before we were supposed to go into 6th grade. I don't know why I'm laughing.
No.
I don't know why I'm
It's
laughing.
the defense mechanism. We'll edit that part
If
out.
you weren't laughing, you'd be crying.
Yes. But it was that idea of this person, like, how did this person not know she made a difference in so many lives? Like, how? And it wasn't until I was actually in college, in undergrad, actually my senior year, I think, that I wrote a paper about this, that it's like, you know what? Like, that was a pivotal moment for me. And at 11 years old, like, I'm writing the eulogy for her. Like, I don't have context of that, but at 21 or whatever age I was in that senior year class, like, I understood. Like, that was a pivotal moment where, you know what? This person had a pretty big effect.
Yeah.
You know, on how you could affect other people. And I think, like, again, I was an English undergrad. I never thought, like, teaching, whatever. But I think that for me, but again, I think we are a culmination of all good and bad experiences of teachers that we never, it's like parenting. Never gonna be like my mom.
That's another podcast.
You know, but I mean, like, you take the good and the bad, and you think, like, God, like, and junior year, like, in my high school, girls are so mean. I wanted to drop out so badly. So it's like, but who was there for me as an educator that year that I was like, that's who I want to be for other people. So you guys have similar stories. So share what, like,
so,
when you really
so
get
would
to
you
the
say
heart
that's
of
your
it.
why, though? Like, really, that's your why, is because you had these adults in your life that you felt really made an impact, right? And
For good or bad.
Good or bad, right?
Good or bad.
Yeah, and you were maybe, I think we've all been in that situation where we were maybe not old enough to think about that fact of good or bad, but we just knew somebody had an impact, and they were a teacher, right?
Isn't that everybody's story a little bit?
I
if we're
think
really
so.
going to admit it.
You know, like, some people are driven by money, right? And then they go into a profession that
Not
driven by
in
money.
I was going to say, so they're not teachers.
Right.
Okay.
But you know what I mean? Like, some people are driven by this idea that they, you know, have to sell things or manipulate, you know, if you want to call you salesmen, manipulators. But I think for the most part, we all had, the reason we went into teaching is because we all had this person in our life, adult, or maybe it was kind of one of those deals where we felt like that is where we had a skill or impact in life, right? You know, I can think of many teachers that I've taught with in the years that had a sibling that maybe was in special education that they really took part in that caring for. And you're right, Liz. I think you're correct in this idea that we all probably who got into teaching had that one adult, right? And that's Liz eating, by the way, crunching on her. Way to be empathetic on this. But, and Chris, you could probably agree, because Chris and I went to school together in high school, and, you know, there were several teachers that had an impact on my life, but really, I didn't think about teaching, honestly, until about my junior year of college. And I really had this idea that I was going to go into the sciences and kind of the CSI route, and apparently you have to go to class to pass them in college. I kind of learned, I really learned that my sophomore year.
Minor detail.
Minor detail. Nobody really, I think that's an applied thing, right? Like, nobody really explains that detailed wise. And, but you know, like, I really did have, as I think back, think about whether they were kids my age or adults, who I consider adults, that I felt like really encouraged me to get into that teaching field. And I don't think I can narrow it down to one or two, but there's a lot of teachers that really implied or kind of encouraged me this idea of like just being supportive of people, right? And just because of the knowledge or the research or the reading that I do, like having that ability to really just connect with where people are and then kind of talk them through like how we can get to that next level. And teaching was a natural field. And so that's really how I got into teaching. That and the money and the summers off
The fame.
and the fame. I mean, don't forget about that. And so with that, we probably could take a quick pause here.
I think it's just that idea of our stories matter as much as the people in front of us, and we're not going to discount their stories any more than ours, but like, I don't know, like, is there finally a platform maybe for not to talk about pedagogy, not to talk about strategies, but just talk about, like, we are the humans that are entrusted, I guess, with, like, creating value for these people who don't see value in their own lives, but, like, what value do we get out of it? And what keeps us coming back day to day on those days where we're like, God, we got our own shit. We got our own shit. But for some reason, there's something within this whole profession that we say, but your shit matters more than mine at this moment. And I can what's that?
Well,
when you compartmentalize.
Compartmentalize. Yeah.
Well, I'm an English teacher.
I think
don't know these big words.
and I think that's we talk about teacher burnout, is that we push down feelings or put aside what's affecting us because we know I'm one person, but there's 20 kids that are waiting for me, and just like we don't know what's going on in a lot of our kids' lives, they don't know what's going on in our lives either. No. And I don't know. Sometimes you feel like almost like it's complaining if you like are talking about what's bothering you, and it may just be one of those self, that's just what I'm thinking about, and maybe people would want to hear, and I know now there's a lot of teachers that are opening up about what they're struggling with, and hopefully, that'll help. I mean,
yeah, because I think I've mentioned this before. There's this idea that knowledge in the old days, and I say old days as if it was 1,000 years ago, but
I talk about the 80s like it was 20 years ago. I'm like, oh my god, that was 40 years ago.
Well, it's hilarious because kids say, what's it like being born in the 1900s? That's a new joke, right? But I think there's this idea that, like, in the quote unquote old days, knowledge was power. I mean, Chris and Liz, you can attest to this. When we used to have to do research, it wasn't like, what did Google, Jeeves, Yahoo say, right? Like, we literally were asking people who were there, right? Like, first-person accounts. Liz, you and I have talked about, like, World War II, right? Like, the idea that our knowledge about World War II didn't come from Google, Wikipedia, random websites. It literally came from...
It came from your grandfather.
Yes! And these passed down stories that were historically accurate. And I think about how today knowledge is not power, right? Like, it is not power. It is what resources do you have at your hands. That is power. And I struggle with that idea because if it takes student A 30 minutes to figure out something because they have to research it, Google it, all that, but student B has it already memorized, like, why is it of greater value that student A can think through and figure out where that came from versus student B already now 10 steps ahead, right? And I think that's what we're all getting at is that at one time we thought we became educators because we figured we had something to pass on to the next generation. And that's the issue is now as educators, and I think that's worldwide, is what do we have to offer kids beyond what they can search, right?
Well, absolutely, because if they can Google it, then we just need robots in front of the classroom.
Yes.
So what are we offering them besides technology at their hands?
And I think that's when we, again, talk to other people and what are they doing that, do they feel the same way? Mm-hmm. Do they feel like they're just babysitting some days? Because what I'm saying to you, you can look up, or the things that we have kids that are missing some skills, but those skills can be easily covered up with a calculator. There's a crisis sometimes of like, what am I doing?
The crisis, yeah, absolutely. Like, what purpose do I have? Because again, in a society that says they value education, yet technology rewards those, the influencers and the quick. What the fuck am I even talking about? They get rich quick. Like, I don't know, like just the idea of like
instant gratification.
Thank you.
And I think, and I kind of like liken teaching to golf sometimes. It's like you're struggling, and all of a sudden you have that one kid that you built that relationship with tell you something exciting that's happened to him, or the kid that you taught 10 years ago on Facebook sends you a message or tags you on like Teacher Appreciation Week, and then you realize that you don't hear about all of that until it's like 10 years down the road most of the time.
Yeah.
So then it's like, I'd made a difference.
Yeah.
And you keep coming back.
But it's not like stocks where you get that, like, hey, you know what? We rose this percentage today. And I think we've talked about theory in undergrad to the practical of our practice to the reality of the feedback that you get from students is not instant. It goes against the grain of what we are used to in society. And I think that's why I have to believe that we will always have people, and another episode, like I think of my daughter who chose to go into education because she saw, no matter on the worst days of my life, like it was still the best choice of profession. She chose to go into it herself. And I think there is a whole generation of people who, like, we still value this. And it's that theory to practical to reality, but also back to the idealism that those of us who choose to stay in this profession, not for the money, we do idealistically believe that we are changing something for good. And whether it takes 10 years, 15 years, a lifetime, they will eventually think about the influence of their lives, and teachers are going to play a role in that at some point.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And as you were talking, Liz, I thought about Warren Buffett has this famous phrase or quote, and he talks about when you invest in something, you want to find companies that are going to be around for 100 years and have a moat, right? And I think about education. Education's going nowhere. By
that you mean it's not going away.
Education is not.
We're going nowhere.
No,
people.
it's not going extinct. I guess is what I'm saying. And at the end of the day, in 100 years, there will still be teachers in some form or fashion. There will still be educators, and you talk about a moat. I think about how teachers are this weird niche, right? Where we talk about jack of all trades. I mean, teachers literally are the Swiss Army knife of careers. And we are everything to anybody. And Warren Buffett, I think, had it right where you invest in those things. But the problem is I feel like those investments of society have not caught up. When you think about teaching, and it's not even about money, it's not about technology. It literally is just about communities and society saying that our kids need to increase their knowledge in either academics, life skills, whatever it may be. But you think about how a lot of people have become very complacent in this idea that schools are going to do everything for kids. And that is a lot. Like you two have said, Chris and Liz, about that's a lot on people. I mean, we're humans at the end of the day, and we have our own lives, our own kids, our own goals, dreams, whatever. And at the end of the day, if we are too physically or mentally worn down to be at work, we pull ourselves up by the bootstraps to say there's 30, 40 kids who are depending on us today to be there because we are everything to them. And I think you make great points on those two things. So.
Okay, so inside Actors Studio here. Questions. Okay,
let's do it.
Okay.
When it comes to teaching every day, at the end of the day, what's the one word that you just want to shout out of your mouth? On an average day of teaching, what's the one word?
Well, I think the person who asked it has to go first.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
I would say, fuck!
I think it's just a big sigh. Like, just
Okay.
a, whew, you know. Got through another one some days. Some days it was amazing. Some days it was not.
yeah, I would have to probably echo both of you. And I know that sounds unoriginal, but
It does.
Yes,
I,
it does.
I almost think of like it is people who do marathons. Like, no, trust me, I haven't ran for years or months. But you know, those people when we watch videos of marathoners, they get to the end, they put their hands
It's
up.
the point two.
Exactly, you're right.
26.2. It's the point two.
It's the point too, absolutely, and that's a great point. For me, it is literally getting to the end of the day, is throwing my hands up, seeing a finish line, but yet going, oh shit, I got another marathon to run tomorrow, right? and you know, like, you know, David Goggins, all those guys who do like, what is it, 50 marathons
Oh,
or 50
God.
days
the
or
ultra marathons.
the alt, whatever it is,
Like me.
like that's what I compare teaching to is, and I've always told, like, you know, I have people who say, well, you get summers off, you have so many days off, and I go, you know what,
Another
like,
episode.
Exactly.
Another episode.
I would go ahead and say, look, take away all those breaks if you come for a week and teach and not complain once, right? Like, you have no complaints at all at the end of that week. And I think that is a challenge that people don't understand. And so you're right. I just throw my hands up like a marathoner. I shit myself at the end and call it good, right?
And on that note,
So if you could have any guest on this show, why are you looking at your watch?
that's an email.
Is your wife needing you?
No, it's not text. It's
We'll
an,
edit
it's an
this
email.
out. If you could have any
Who will?
guest on the show, well, when I learn this, when I learn this, any guest on the show with the purpose of influencing them in the mindset of, I want you to know this about what I have chosen as a career. Who would you choose to have on with a conversation?
Chris,
I'm thinking.
that's a challenging question.
That's a really good question.
I mean,
Barring any like reality.
Do they
of,
have
like,
to be
how we
alive?
could- yeah, no. Like they don't have to be alive. They don't. We're not talking expense. Nothing. Like the ideal. Like who would you talk to say like this is what I
No.
want you to know?
That's like asking what historical football coach, dead or alive, would be the best today. Like,
Who would that be?
I don't think you can answer that
Okay.
because the game
So
is
that's your
completely different. Yeah, that's
Okay.
my point. Is that the game and
Okay, so let me ask you a different question. Who would you ask on this show that could influence education in the way that you would want it to be influenced? Whether that's from a political standpoint, from a financial, is that any better of a question?
Well, I think you got to narrow it down
Okay.
because, like, you know what I mean, to segment it,
fuck.
you're talking
Okay.
about. Geez, that's a great question, Liz.
It is a
Like,
great question.
Who would be in our society? Who would you deem is the greatest influencer that could, like, if you wanted to say this is what we want done in education, and you're the person to get us there?
that's
You're teach English. You.
you know, like, so I don't know about you, Chris, but like,
How many drinks are you at?
I know, like 4.
Chris, Justin,
You know,
Chris.
but like, I think I don't know. The older I get, obviously, like the more reflective I think I feel.
And
but
you're
there's
25.
oh yeah, that's true. But I think about like what is it like in the Bible where and not to be religious, but God says, "Who should I send?" Right, and we say, "Here am I, send I."
You want me to sing?
Or send
I was
me, right?
Catholic.
Right,
I can sing this.
and right, and I think about like teaching, like you said earlier, Liz, is a calling, right? And we all feel that, right? We all feel that intense urge to go into this field? I mean, obviously, for someone to do teaching for 20 years, there's a reason. It's not because they're stuck, they can't get another career. Like, you know, people say that, but I think about it now, like, I could go to Walmart, right, and be the greeter for $25, right, an hour. But it's a calling, and I almost think that you have to go outside of teaching to think about that, right? Like, what other career fields is there's an idea that it's a calling? It is not because my skills are great at it or because I want to. Like, I would love to play baseball professionally, but I suck at baseball, right? Like I can't do what I'm passionate about. Right?
At your age.
Whoa. It's Dominican Republic. Come on now.
Well, because he hasn't answered the question.
Exactly.
I don't know who I would think would
I don't know if there's one person that could make a...
Because think of all the characteristics. You're right, Chris. Think of all the characteristics that make a great teacher. It's not in today's world. Now, if we were talking about one classroom or one building class with like 7 grades.
Who? Yeah, let's ask you.
I want Mark Cuban.
Mark Cuban would be...
I feel like if we could get him on our podcast, I would like call it a day because...
Then I would say Elon Musk.
Ooh,
That's what I would probably go with. He started his own school. He's self-educated.
I feel like those are the people, those entrepreneurs, those people who... Warren Buffett even. But Mark Cuban, I feel like... You know what? He doesn't really... And Elon Musk is the same way. Like, they don't really listen to popular opinion. It's like, you know what? I know what I want. I'm going to go at it. I don't know. I would just to get their take on...
And they have enough money to do what they want to do with it. Like, if you said one legislator, that's not going to get anything... That's not going to get anything done if you have one person.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
I don't think I answered the question, actually, because...
you asked...
I wasn't going for an influencer, and that's what I think I answered it with, but...
Are you saying like who you think would move the needle the most then?
I think who could influence people enough to think that education is important enough to put at the forefront of a national conversation, because now I feel like it's just there because everybody knows we have to talk about education, but who's really going to sit there and say, no, like, let's freaking talk about this. And the reason I say Mark Cuban is because I think he talks about, like, what skills do people really need to advance in this world? And when he talked about the pandemic, he was like, what have you done in the last year? He said, that's the one interview question I would ask. What have you done in the last year? And he would want people who have cultivated a new skill or enhance something else. And I feel like they're more in tune with, like, what do we really need to move our whole society forward versus politicians who are going to say whatever their constituents want to say. Yeah. These people don't. Like, so I guess maybe that's where, I don't know. Yeah. I'm all over the place.
Well, they're not bound by having 200 other people they have to influence to get something done.
I mean, those real independent thinkers who are like, you know what, I have enough money, I don't need yours, so I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah, and I think it's a good idea, so that's what we're going to do.
And it may not even be about money, but it may be just about, like, who we think would connect to a lot of people, but in the same token, speak to the idea of application of learned skills. Like, I think about, like, there's a great episode on How I Met Your Mother, right?
On The Office.
Where Barney meets his real dad, and he goes out to steal the basketball hoop from the garage. But he was never taught how to use a screwdriver. And that always reminds me and makes me think about what skills did I not learn along the way. And I'm 38, like, what skills have I not learned to make me be able to do what I want to do? And you're right. You think about like a Mark Cuban, self-made, sold 2 companies to make himself a billionaire, bought a basketball team, all that. Like, those were not mistakes, right? Like, you think about, what is it? Fubu, Sean, whatever his name is. Same deal. Like, I would love to have him on because he talks about being in a like 1-room apartment, literally hand sewing clothes, right? Yeah. And it wasn't because he knew he was going to be successful. It's because he knew if he didn't sell like X number of pieces of clothing, he wasn't going to pay the rent the month. And I think that's where real skill is born and education is really born. And I think about how kids learn today. A lot of people, like, Liz, you and I and Chris and I have talked about that project-based learning. It's not exploration learning. Chris, if you had to fix the faucet in your bathroom, you wouldn't necessarily go to college and learn that plumbing skill. You're going to watch a video. You're going to call relatives. You're going to experiment, right? You may have water 3 feet tall in your bathroom, but you would learn how to do that. And I think that's where we need to move. And so you asked who would we invite. I really think we need to think about who has that entrepreneurial spirit, right? Like who's failed, who's learned, and then who's moved on from it and been successful. And I don't think that has to be like what person came from, if we want to do politics, like who came from white class and all that. I don't think that matters. I think success is success. And I think when we talk about who we want on this podcast, that creates a whole nother topic, right? Like, are we saying like success is became a millionaire? Success is the philosopher who was in poverty, but yet he or she has these great thoughts, right? I think about artists, right, who created all these great paintings but never saw them to fruition.
I think that's why when we talk about this podcast and we talk about professionals as humans, I think that all comes into play as far as like, what do we mean when we say we want to, what the fuck?
Are you still awake, Liz? Like, hey, we're in your apartment, Liz.
Whoa!
It's a safe place.
But we want to help the future generation. But what are we helping them for? Like, is it for exploration? Is it for? I mean, I don't know. Like, it's not the same as it was before.
No.
It's a whole different type of learning.
I feel like we've digressed here.
Yeah, a little bit. But do we want to talk about, like, for those new teachers, like, how we became teachers? Like, what was the process and experience? Or do we want to provide a galaxy or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Like, do we want to provide, like, kind of this roadmap to, if you're thinking about getting into education, here are some things you should think about, and this is the reality of it? Or are we really here just to say, look, you want to get into education, you're a moron. Like, you know what I'm saying?
A little bit of the past. I feel like it is just like the reality check.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's for like any teachers that are like stressed out right now and they just want to hear somebody's going through the same stuff as they are, and it's almost that
validate it.
Validate it, sigh of relief, going to, we say belly up to the blackboard, going to the bar and being able to let off steam.
Yeah.
I think
way
that's...
to bring us around, Chris. Way to bring us around.
Somebody has to be sober.
Because I do feel like,
I think that's what it is. And that's the sharing stories, and, I think that we'll provide on the podcast is...
No, thank you for bringing us around, because I went to a whole nother thing. Like, seriously, because I think part of that of understanding us as professionals, as humans, is understanding where we came from and what we believe in. But it really does come down to the idea of, like, this should just be a place where,
have fun, share stories, and,
Chris is shaming me right now. Okay.
Well, on that note, we never cheers or did any kind of like, is somebody going to say any kind of like christening of this? Christening. You edit that out.
See you next week.
See you next week.
No, I guess here's a testimony too also that 3 people who come together for a common purpose that is larger than the 3 of us, but also you guys have known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
You've taken me in, well, they're still on the fence about that.
Don Corleone, I want to say thank you for the...
But I do think it's evident of coming from different backgrounds, but still also finding that common ground of like, it doesn't matter how long you've been in this, what your backgrounds are from, or how long you've known somebody, that there is a commonality to this profession that we all choose to be a part of. And the idea that whatever we talk about might be something that other people want to talk about,
Absolutely.
you know, and that they can relate to. And if they don't have a way to relate to that, that maybe this could be the place that, you know what, okay, I'm not out there alone.
Yeah.
So
Agreed. Yep.
their
Yeah.
wives are waiting for them. So
Cheers.
cheers.
That is what we're cheersing to?
Yes.
Apparently, their wives are waiting for their rides.
See you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Yeah.
That was 50.